The rain had just started falling when everything fell apart. I still remember the sound of it hitting the pavement outside the courthouse, soft at first, then harder, like the sky itself was trying to drown out the silence between us. One moment I believed there was still hope. The next moment, it was gone. I stood there on the courthouse steps in Cedar Falls, Iowa, staring at the woman I had loved for 5 years. Her eyes wouldn't meet mine. Her shoulders were tense, her arms folded tightly across her chest like she was protecting herself from something invisible. Maybe from me. Maybe from the memories we both knew were now shattered. The judge's decision had been final. Our relationship, once filled with laughter and late-night dreams, had collapsed under the weight of misunderstandings, pride, and the quiet cruelty of life's unexpected struggles. My name is Jacob, and that morning I thought I had just lost everything. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something important. If you believe people deserve kindness, forgiveness, and second chances in life, take a moment right now to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who believes in hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that even when things seem finished, life can still surprise us, because what happened next changed everything. The woman standing in front of me was Rachel, the person who had once been the center of my world. We had met years earlier at a small bookstore in Portland, Oregon, both reaching for the same copy of a dusty old novel on a clearance shelf. That moment had turned into coffee, coffee had turned into dinners, and dinners had turned into something that felt permanent. At least, that's what I believed. Rachel was the kind of person who could walk into a room and quietly make it brighter. She worked as a pediatric nurse, and children adored her gentle voice and endless patience. I was a mechanic who spent most days covered in grease and engine oil, but she never made me feel less important than the doctors she worked beside. We were different in 100 ways, but somehow it worked. Until it didn't. Life started changing when Rachel's father passed away unexpectedly. The loss hit her family hard, especially her mother, Margaret, who had always depended on him. Rachel tried to be strong for everyone, but grief is like a slow storm, it seeps into everything. Our conversations became shorter, our smiles less frequent. I tried to help, but sometimes help looks like interference when someone is hurting. Soon misunderstandings turned into arguments. Silence turned into distance. By the time we realized how far apart we had drifted, it felt like we were already strangers standing in the same room. And now we were standing outside a courthouse, the rain soaking through my jacket as Rachel walked down the steps without looking back. That's when I truly believed it was over. I stood there for several minutes after she left, numb and hollow, watching people rush past with umbrellas and briefcases. Life continued moving around me like nothing had happened, while my world felt like it had quietly collapsed. Eventually I started walking toward my truck, every step heavier than the last. But before I reached it, I heard someone call my name. Not Rachel, her mother. Margaret stood under the courthouse awning, her silver hair damp from the misty rain. She looked smaller than I remembered, but her eyes were sharp and steady. For a moment neither of us spoke. Margaret had never blamed me openly, but I always sensed she believed I had failed Rachel somehow. So when she slowly walked toward me, I expected anger or disappointment. Instead, she said something that stopped me cold. "Jacob," she said quietly, "I think it's my turn now." At first, I didn't understand what she meant. Margaret gestured toward a nearby bench and sat down with a careful sigh. I hesitated before joining her, unsure why she wanted to talk to the man her daughter had just left behind. For a few seconds, she simply watched the rain. Then she began telling me things I had never known. She spoke about Rachel's childhood fears, about how losing her father had broken something deep inside her. She admitted Rachel had been afraid of depending on anyone again because loss had become too real. But then Margaret said something even more surprising. She told me Rachel had spent weeks crying at night before making the decision to walk away, not because she stopped loving me, but because she believed she was becoming a burden to my life. I sat there stunned. All this time I had believed Rachel left because she no longer cared, but the truth was the opposite. Margaret explained that grief had twisted Rachel's thinking. She thought pushing me away would protect me from her pain, and I watched my daughter make the biggest mistake of her life. Margaret said quietly. So now it's my turn to fix what I should have fixed sooner. I didn't know what to say. My heart, which had felt empty moments earlier, suddenly filled with a fragile kind of hope. Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a small folded note. She wrote this yesterday, she said. She never planned to give it to you. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakably Rachel's. The words were simple but heavy with emotion. She wrote that loving me had been the best thing that ever happened to her. She wrote that losing her father made her terrified of losing anyone else, and pushing me away felt like the only way to avoid that pain. But the final sentence stayed with me the most. It said she hoped one day I would forgive her, even if we never saw each other again. The rain had stopped by the time I finished reading. Margaret looked at me carefully before speaking again. She's at the airport, she said. My heart skipped. She thinks she's starting over in Denver, Colorado, Margaret continued. But sometimes people run away because they're scared, not because they want to leave. Then Margaret stood up slowly and looked straight into my eyes. That girl still loves you, Jacob, she said. But someone needs to fight for her before she disappears from her own life. For a moment the world felt perfectly still. Then I realized something. This wasn't the end of my story. It was a second chance. And it existed because a mother refused to watch her daughter destroy something beautiful. Margaret smiled gently as she handed me Rachel's flight details. I raised Rachel to be brave, she said softly. But sometimes bravery needs a little help. I drove to the airport faster than I ever had in my life. My heart pounded the entire way, unsure whether I was chasing hope or heartbreak. But when I finally stepped into the crowded terminal and saw Rachel standing near the departure gate with a suitcase beside her, I knew something inside me had already changed. Because love isn't about perfect timing. It's about choosing each other, even after everything falls apart. Now, before this story comes to its ending, I want to ask you something special. If you've ever fought for someone you love, or someone fought for you, write the word second chance in the comments right now. Your stories matter too. Rachel looked up as I approached, surprise flooding her face. The moment felt fragile, like glass balanced on the edge of breaking. But this time, neither of us walked away. Because sometimes when you think everything is over, life quietly sends someone to remind you that love is still worth fighting for. And in my case, that reminder came from a mother who refused to give up on her daughter's happiness. So if this story touched your heart even a little, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe for more stories that remind us how powerful kindness and courage can be. Because sometimes the people who save our love stories are the ones we least expect.